Welcome to EPG Pathashala. I am Professor K. Srinivas from Pondicherry University. I teach philosophy at that university. I am the course coordinator for Indian religion and philosophy in the subject Indian culture. In the module on Dvaita, we are going to learn the following objectives. What is Dvaita? The nature of supreme reality according to Dvaita. The status of the world according to Dvaita. How do we attain liberation according to Dvaita? Dvaita being one of the most important philosophical systems, rather Vedantic systems, has its own significance in Indian philosophical thought. The propounder of this particular school of thought is Madhva. Like Advaita and Visishtadvaita, Dvaita is also a Vedantic tradition. The first systematic exponent of this school of thought is Madhva, who lived between 1199 to 1278. The other names of Madhva were Narayana, Vasudeva, Purna Prajna, and Anandatirtha. He studied under Achyuta Preksha, but he dissatisfied with his teacher's non-dualistic interpretation of Vedanta and decided to have an independent study. After several years of independent study and reflection of Vedanta, he arrived at Dvaita Vedanta on his own. According to Madhva, both Brahman and the real world are real. It appears that he wrote around 37 works, and the most important among them are Madhva Bhashya and Gita Bhashya. Apart from them, his commentaries on the Brahma Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita are equally inspiring. As a committed dualist, he advocated personalistic theism. He equated Brahman with Lord Vishnu and founded a sect called Sadvaishnavism. It is also known as Brahma Vaishnavism. This is the picture of Madhva which you are seeing. Well, coming to his epistemology, Madhva admits three valid means of cognition. They are perception, inference, and scripture or verbal knowledge. All other forms of knowledge can be brought under any one of these categories of knowledge. He defines valid cognition as the cognition of the object as it is. Such cognition is of two kinds: cognition as knowledge itself, Keval Pramana, and cognition as an instrument of true knowledge, Anupramana. Cognition is of two types: valid cognition, which is the consciousness belonging to the knower, Sakshijnana, and valid cognition, which is the consciousness belonging to the functions. They are called vrittis of mind and senses. The former is infallible, Swata Pramanya. The later is of three kinds. They are perception, inference, and verbal testimony. Memory is also a valid form of knowledge, although it is a form of perception, according to Madhva. Coming to perception, Madhva's doctrine of perception is the same as expounded in the treatises on Nyaya Vaiseshika. However, the followers of Madhva do not admit sixfold contact relationship between the senses and the object, and the distinction between indeterminate, nirvikalpaka, and determinate, savikalpaka forms of perception. The sixfold contact relationship cannot be accepted by Madhva because he rejected the relation of inherence called samavaya. Since all cognition is of determinate in nature, there exists no distinction between indeterminate and determinate forms of perception according to Madhva. Every object possesses a determinant such as color, shape, size, etc., which is reflected in the perception of that object. Even Sri Ramanuja's distinction between indeterminate and determinate forms of perception is not acceptable to Madhva. The other important source of knowledge according to Madhva is inference. Madhva's conception of inference differs from the rest of the Vedantic schools. For example, scripture is of two kinds, namely that which is authored and that which is not authored. All the Puranas, Itihasas, Dharmashastras come under the former category, for they are Smriti texts. It amounts to saying that there is an author for each and every text, Smriti text. On the other hand, the Vedas belong to the later category, for they do not have any author. That's the reason we call them Apaurusheya, and there is no human agency involved in writing the Vedas. According to Dvaita, the Veda is eternal, and in this respect, it sides with Mimamsa, but both the forms of scripture are infallible in the sense they are highly acceptable to the followers of the tradition without any kind of doubt. Now coming to validity of knowledge. Like all other Vedantins, Madhva holds that knowledge is self-validated, swata pramanya, and its invalidity is due to some extraneous factors, partha pramanya. But Madhva raises the question. This question is a very important question so far as his epistemology is concerned. How does knowledge, which is valid in itself, become invalid sometimes? If valid in itself, how can any other factor influence its validity? How can anything make it false? For example, so long as I see a mirage as water, it is true for me, but later on, it may turn out to be false. Thus, it may be possible for any knowledge to become false. Therefore, when it is said that some knowledge is self-valid, according to Madhva, it is the knowledge obtained from the scripture, or it is the knowledge that is the consciousness of witness Sakshi, which is the Atman itself. But knowledge which is obtained from the vrittis or the sense organs or functions of mind is liable to error and it is not self-valid. Further, Madhva argues that there are two forms of knowledge, namely direct and indirect forms of knowledge. What are these direct forms of knowledge and indirect forms of knowledge according to him? For instance, the knowledge attained by Atman is said to be direct, for it involves no instruments such as mind, sense organs, and indirect knowledge is obtained through mind and sense organs. In that sense, mind and sense organs are supposed to be the instruments or the media through which such form of knowledge is attained. Therefore, we technically call such knowledge as indirect knowledge. Direct knowledge can never be contradicted. According to Madhva, we cannot contradict direct knowledge because there is no medium involved in attaining such kind of knowledge. Therefore, he believes that any form of direct knowledge can be absolutely be true. Therefore, it can never be contradicted. Now coming to his metaphysics, another important factor in his philosophy, Madhva's theory of knowledge is somehow centered around perception. Therefore, perception becomes the foundation of Madhva's metaphysical dualism. He gives lots of importance to perception, and he tries to show how perception influences his metaphysics. For example, he held that to perceive is to become aware of something as being unique and different from other things as well as the perceiving self. Normally, when we perceive any object, we know what kind of object is being perceived and in what way this object is different from the rest of the objects. That's what our perception gives. Similarly, true knowledge arises out of articulation of perceived differences between things as well as between things and the perceiving self. What Madhva tries to hold here is there is a difference between one thing and another thing, and also there is a difference between things and the perceiving self. The perceiving self is completely different from the things that are perceived. At the same time, you also find differences among the things that we perceive. Therefore, to deny perception is to deny the very possibility of knowledge. So, in that way, Madhva tries to give so much of significance and importance to perception as a valid means of knowledge or pramana. However, Madhva cautions us, especially those who affirm identity but deny the difference. According to him, perception necessarily implies the perceiver and the perceived as distinct existence. In that case, knowledge that is obtained through perception also involves the knower and the known as a distinct existence. To put it more clearly, all knowledge is relative in the sense that it is relative to the knower and some known. As such, no claim to knowledge can conceivably reject this view without running into contradiction or absurdity. And this is what we technically call epistemological dualism. Whenever we talk about knowledge of the empirical world, there is always a polarity between the subject and object, the subject being the perceiver, the object being the perceived. This dualism persists in our day-to-day affairs of knowledge, and perhaps Madhva accepted this dualism in his epistemology. Further, based on this argument, Madhva rejects the tenability of non-dual, absolute knowledge. He says all knowledge being relative, it is highly doubtful whether there is any knowledge which is absolute in itself. It is clear from the above argument that Madhva is both an epistemological and ontological realist to the core. Well, in his realism, it is conspicuous that the reality or the world is real, and the objects existing in this world are also equally real. So thus he attaches significance and importance to the world of existence. In that sense, he is technically called a realist. According to him, we not only perceive the world as constituted by different selves and material objects, but in reality too, it is the case. The empirical world is real and pluralistic. We call it real because the objects existing in this empirical world are real, and since this world of objects has innumerable objects within itself, it is pluralistic in nature. Further, Madhva held that Brahman, the creator and the lord of the world, is distinct from the world. This point needs to be highlighted because Madhva says the world is real and the creator of the world is also real. Therefore, his philosophy is through and through a philosophy of difference or a distinctionism. Madhva recognized 5 fundamental and absolute distinctions among the following. They are, for example, he finds that there is a difference between Brahman and individual selves. You cannot equate Brahman with individual selves or individual selves with Brahman. They are distinct according to Madhva. Then there is also a difference between Brahman and matter. Brahman represents the spirit, the matter represents non-spirit. In that sense, both Brahman and matter, they are not identical. Then there is a difference according to Madhva. Then the third one is the difference between matter and the individual selves. Individual selves or the jivas are completely different from the matter. Now, he also talks about the difference between one individual self and another individual self, because one individual self is different from another individual self, that there is uniqueness in each and every individual self. The unique identity of individual self makes this individual self a specific individual. Therefore, one individual self is different from another individual self according to Madhva. Then he also talks about the difference between one material object and another material object. For example, a table is a material object, a chair is also a material object. A table is different from a chair, although both of them are called material objects. Also, Madhva divides the world into independent swatantra and dependent aswatantra beings. For example, there are certain independent entities within this world which can exist on their own. But there are certain dependent entities within this world which exist only when the other things exist. For example, let us talk about the relationship between substance and attributes. Substance can exist independent of attributes, but attributes cannot exist independent of substance because the attributes subsist in the substance. Therefore, they are technically aswatantra. For instance, Brahman, who is identified with Lord Vishnu, is the only independent being according to Madhva. Selves, material objects are dependent upon Brahman for their existence. Here in this case, Madhva is very clear. The supreme reality, namely the Brahman, which is none other than Lord Vishnu, is the only entity or the only reality which is swatantra. All other realities, especially the objects that are existing in this world, the world being real, they are dependent on Brahman for their existence, although they are real according to Madhva. Therefore, they become aswatantra. Now, coming to negation, this is one of the most important aspects that Madhva discusses in his philosophy or in his dualism. According to him, like Nyaya Vaiseshika, he admits that the reality of negation, but with a difference. What kind of difference does he see? According to Ramanuja, difference cannot be reduced to negation, for difference is positive, constitutive feature of the object itself. Mathva views differences in this similar manner. Then we have only three kinds of negation left. They are prior negation, posterior negation, and absolute negation. For example, his views on prior and posterior forms of negation are akin to that of Nyaya and Vaiseshika, but his views on absolute negation are different from them. According to Nyaya Vaiseshika, absolute negation is a negation of an object at all time and place except when and where it exists. For Madhva, the negation of the son of barren woman can be treated as an absolute negation. He argues that the idea of negation is to negate everything which is real, unreal, imaginary, possible or impossible. Anything can be negated. Now coming to substance, Mathva gives his own interpretation of substance or the nature of substance. What exactly is the nature of substance according to Mathva? He interprets substance as the material cause of change and also as that which comes into contact with other substances. For example, we cannot expect any change without substance. This is something called an absurdity, for instance. However, God, the supernals, and the Atman do not undergo any change, but only manifest themselves in different circumstances. Therefore, change in some cases is only a manifestation, as highlighted above. Substance, in other words, is that which undergoes change or manifests itself in one form or the other according to Mathva. It also comes into contact with other substances. For example, we notice that there are some external relations among the substances existing in this world. That is the nature of a substance. That means a substance cannot exist in isolation from another substance according to Mathva. There is always some kind of connection between one substance and another. That is what he calls the substances enter into relations when they are existing in this empirical world. Coming to the Atman, Mathva identifies Atman with witness consciousness or Sakshi. Jiva Sakshi or Sakshi Chaitanya, they are the other names given to this particular expression Atman. It is the nature of I consciousness. Like in Sri Ramanuja's philosophy, which is different from ego. It is the knower, jnata, doer, karta, and enjoyer, bhokta of the fruits of action. So ego is completely different from Atman. If you want, one can say the ego is the empirical consciousness or psychological consciousness, but this cannot be equated with I consciousness, which is pure self. The Atmans are atomistic and constitute a plurality, and each having a particularity of its own, Vishesha. That's what we say, the individual Atmans or the plurality of Atmans are known as jivas or jivatmans. And each jivatman has its own specificity or particularity. And one jivatman is different from another jivatman because each one of them possesses a visesha, a quality, a specific quality. They are absolutely dependent on God, Paratantra. However, all these jivatmans or the individual selves are dependent on God for their existence, who alone is self-dependent Swatantra. This clearly establishes the view that Madhva accepts that there are selves, but these selves are dependent on God for their existence. By nature, every Atman is existent, conscious and blissful, Satchit Ananda. Due to ignorance, avidya, its original nature gets entangled with Prakriti. This entanglement results in bondage according to Madhva. Perhaps Madhva wants to highlight that Atmans possess consciousness, bliss, and they do exist. However, they also possess ignorance. Because of this ignorance, they are entangled in this world of objects and they develop a sense of attachment towards these objects. This sense of attachment to objects results in a kind of a bondage according to Madhva. Every Atman is different from God, Prakriti and other Atmans. This is very clear and evident in Madhva's philosophy. Because every Atman is different from God. Every Atman is also different from Prakriti or the primordial matter. And one Atman is different from another Atman. This is what he tried to emphasize in his dualism. Coming to the Upanishads, it is mentioned that Atman is the same as Brahman. How does Madhva react to such a situation or position? Madhva interprets it that Atman is similar to Brahman in the sense that the reflection, pratibimba of one's face in the mirror is similar to one's face. In other words, he tries to show the Atman is the reflection of Brahman in the sense in which the mirror image of an individual is similar to the individual or a reflection of the individual. They are not one and the same. Here Madhva makes it very clear. You cannot equate the reflection of an object with the object. They are two different things. He treats Atman as a reflection of Brahman, and this reflection cannot be same as Brahman. They are two distinct things. Although the Atmans are reflections or images of Brahman, they cannot be destroyed, unlike ordinary objects which can be destroyed. But there is a peculiarity attached to Atmans according to Madhva. Being reflections of Brahman, the Atmans are also eternal in one sense or the other, being the reflections of Brahman. Insofar as Brahman exists, the Atmans also do exist. Just as Brahman cannot be treated as a non-existent, Atmans cannot be treated as non-existents too, because Brahman is something existent. This is the reason we call Sat. It is real. If Brahman is real, the reflection of the Brahman is also real. Insofar as Brahman exists, Brahman's reflections also do exist. Therefore, the Atmans cannot be destroyed, unlike the objects in this world which can be destroyed. This is the analogy which Madhva tries to bring in to substantiate his view with regard to the nature of Atmans and the reality of Atmans, and Atmans being the reflections of Brahman. They can never be destroyed. Their reflective nature of Brahman is not created by any external conditions, upadhis. So we cannot say that when the conditions are destroyed, the images are gone. So therefore, according to Madhva, Atmans are the reflections of Brahman. However, they become the reflections of Brahman because of certain external entities or factors is not acceptable to him. They are reflections of Brahman without being influenced by any external factors. Therefore, even when the external factors are destroyed, Atmans being the reflections of Brahman can never be destroyed. Therefore, they are permanent. Both Atman and its consciousness are two particulars. In the sense that we have two particulars here. Every Atman possesses consciousness. Therefore, if Atman is treated as a particular, its consciousness is also treated as a particular. Now coming to Maya and Avidya, two very important and fascinating concepts that you come across in Madhva. Although Maya and Avidya are equated to Prakriti, yet they are viewed as separate from it in Dvaita. Like Sri Ramanuja, Madhva rejects Advaitic interpretation of Maya and Avidya. There is a radical shift from Advaitic interpretation. How does it happen? What kind of interpretation does Madhva give with regard to the nature of Maya and Avidya, which is completely distinct from that of Advaita? According to Madhva, Maya is the mysterious will of God, Isvarecha. Avidya is the ignorance of Atman or the individual self. Therefore, Madhva refuses to equate or identify Maya with Avidya. Now, like Advaitins, Madhva holds that this Avidya is not negative. This is one of the most important features that you find in Madhva's philosophy, wherein normally we think Avidya is negative, ignorance is negative. But like Advaitins, Madhva also feels that Avidya is a positive entity. The locus of Avidya is Atman, but not the Brahman. That is very, very important point which needs to be interpreted and remembered in Madhva's philosophy. For example, Avidya has twofold function. What are the functions of Avidya? It conceals the true nature of Atman from itself and also conceals the Brahman, the God, from the Atman. So that's what we technically call Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. They are the two important Shaktis or potencies of Atman. Now, although the Atman is self-luminous, Avidya enters it due to the peculiar will of God. I think this is the explanation that Madhva gives. Then Atman gets entangled in Prakriti and its modifications. We do not know when Avidya entered Atman. This is the very interesting point that Madhva raises in his Dvaita. In other words, the relation of Avidya to Atman is beginningless, anadi, timeless. When the Atman attains its liberation, it gets rid of Avidya and frees itself from Prakriti. Here we need to interpret the nature of avidya in such a way. Although we do not know when avidya entered Atman, but there is a beginning. Since there is a beginning of avidya, there is also a possibility of end of avidya. Only when the avidya is completely removed, the individual self or Atman gets liberated. The second function of avidya is to conceal the Brahman from Atman, avarana. Such concealment makes Atman think that it is independent of the Brahman. The Atman can free itself from this function of avidya only when it realizes that it is dependent on God. Thus, Madhva's conception of avidya is different from that of Shankara and Sri Ramanuja, but his conception of Maya is similar to that of Sri Ramanuja, but different from Shankara. Now coming to God and Brahman, which is very important aspect in Madhva's dualism. Like Sri Ramanuja, Madhva identifies the personal God with Brahman and rejects the doctrine of Shankara that Brahman is bereft of qualities nirguna. Perhaps like Sri Ramanuja, Madhva does not accept the notion of nirguna Brahman. The Brahman possesses all the auspicious qualities and is the personal God himself. He is the creator, sustainer, and destroyer of the world. Therefore, Brahman, according to Madhva, is only sagunatmaka. The concept of nirguna Brahman is not acceptable to Madhva, like that of Ramanuja. But unlike Sri Ramanuja's God, Madhva's God is completely different from Atman's, Prakriti, space and time. Madhva, being the follower of Pancharatra tradition, believes that God is independent and self-dependent. God does not require anything for his own existence. God cannot be the material cause, for he can only be efficient and instrumental cause. This is one of the most significant points that Madhva raises in his dualism. If God is material, then he undergoes transformation, then such self-transformation affects his perfection. Since God being perfect, he cannot be the material cause. He must be independent of all such transformations. However, God can be the efficient cause. Because without God, nothing changes. It is through God any change takes place. In that sense, Madhva calls God an efficient cause, but not the material cause. Coming to Prakriti and causation, Madhva does not accept Nyaya Vaiseshika view of causation, according to which the effect does not pre-exist in the cause, namely the Asatkaryavada. If that is the cause, then the effect is something non-being. Madhva, on the contrary, holds that there is nothing absolutely new. Every form of causation is a change from the subtle to gross state and vice versa. Therefore, he contributes or subscribes to Satkaryavada, strictly speaking. Now, transformation or parinama means such a change from subtle to gross state. This kind of change is seen in the case of Prakriti, wherein its evolutes evolve out of it. What evolves from Prakriti is already contained in its potential stage in Prakriti. Therefore, nothing absolutely new comes out of causation, according to Madhva. But God and souls do not go such transformation. Either they become manifest or unmanifest. Manifestation, strictly speaking, is not the transformation according to Madhva. Because you cannot expect God to transform into something, and souls being the representations of God or images of God, they too do not undergo any transformation. In the case of God, manifestation is due to His kindness. But if Prakriti shows what is already contained in them, it is difficult to draw a distinction between change and manifestation. Madhva perhaps means that there are two types of manifestation, and change is one form of manifestation. The creation of world by God does not mean that the world came into existence at a particular time. It is unthinkable to say that God existed first and then created this world. He is God and created at one and the same time. Therefore, what Madhva feels here is, it is wrong to hold the view that first there is an existence of God, then God being a creator, He created the world. Such a conception is untenable with Madhva's dualism. The world is created by God means that it is always dependent on Him. So the world is there ever since the God is there, in other words. Creation is something continuous, therefore what is created is also continuously dependent on God. In that sense, causality means dependence. Now coming to time and space, Madhva holds that time is an evolution of Prakriti or evolute of Prakriti. Along with cosmic reason, Mahat, all other evolutes evolved out of Mahat and exist in time. Therefore, time is real. Concerning space, Madhva holds that space is different from ether, Akasha. Space, Dik, is that which offers place for things to exist and move. So therefore, he refuses to equate space with ether. Ether is the origin of sound. It is one of the bhutas or one of the panchabhutas. Even Prakriti requires space to exist. Space is therefore a distinct reality, independent of Prakriti, because Prakriti is located in space, but space is not located in Prakriti according to Madhva. Although time and space are infinite, they can be infinitely divisible, and their divisions also are as real as the infinite wholes. The parts into which time and space are divided are also times and spaces. They are not durationless and extensionless points. Time and space cannot be inferred, for there is no major premise from which they can be inferred. They are perceived, but they cannot be perceived by functional consciousness or vritti jnana, but by witness consciousness, sakshi jnana. Now coming to liberation, one of the most important aspects of Madhva's soteriology, every individual has to get liberated from bondage. That is the ultimate goal of Madhva's dualism. Then how is this liberation possible? According to him, action leads to knowledge, and knowledge leads to love of God. There is nothing superior to self-surrender. The souls after liberation, they live along with the God in the same world, Salokya. They live near God, Samipya. They also become like God, Sarupya. They also enjoy together with God, Saluja. However, they never become one with God. This is one of the most important features of Madhva's soteriology. God gives everything that is required for a soul that is liberated, but a soul can never be equated with God. For Madhva, the liberated souls do not form the body of God. They are completely different from God. Madhva holds that bondage is due to avidya and is positive in nature. It has the power of concealment and the power of projection. But avidya does not wield the original existence of Atman. It always knows its existence. God Himself is responsible for avidya in the Atman. Therefore, God has to be loved and worshipped in order to get avidya removed. How do we love God? According to Madhva, one has to worship God. Finally, one has to surrender to God. And once you surrender to God, God bestows His grace on you. Once God bestows His grace on you, you overcome avidya. It is only through direct and unmediated experience of God, which is technically called aparokshanubhuti, one can overcome avidya, in the sense that one needs to surrender to God, and this surrender is technically called prapatti. Not only the bhakti, but also prapatti is necessary to get oneself liberated. Now, for further reading, I request you to go through the e-text in order to know the full details of Madhva's dualism. Thank you.